Sarah Whittaker lived comfortably in her family home in Surrey. It was a beautiful old house surrounded by sprawling gardens and ancient oak trees. After decades of memories, she had never imagined a day would come when her own son would betray her trust. James Whittaker was a man she had raised with love and care. Now, he was working in London as a marketing manager, often traveling for business. That morning, Sarah received a call that chilled her to the bone. James told her he was on a business trip, but what he did not mention was that he was secretly meeting with a solicitor to sell the family home. Sarah did not learn this from him. Instead, she heard whispers from neighbors and a chance encounter with a local estate agent. The house had already been put on the market. Despite the shock, Sarah did not panic. She sat quietly, contemplating the situation. She knew there was more to this story than James had told her. What was his reason for selling the house without her knowledge? Was it desperation or something else entirely? For now, Sarah decided to stay calm. She had always been a woman of resilience. She reminded herself that she owned other properties, smaller but still valuable. This was not the end, but perhaps the beginning of a new chapter. As the sun set behind the Surrey hills, Sarah prepared herself for the difficult conversations ahead. Her son's betrayal was painful, yet she refused to let it break her spirit. Sarah could hardly sleep that night. The house felt colder, emptier somehow, as if the walls themselves mourned the betrayal. She walked through the rooms she had known for years, the kitchen where she baked with her late mother, the lounge where James had taken his first steps. Each corner held a memory, yet now they felt tainted by deception. Early the next morning, Sarah decided to confront James. She called him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Her messages went unanswered. It was as if he had vanished. The son she once knew had become a stranger. Unable to wait, Sarah reached out to a trusted friend and solicitor, Mr. Ellis, who had helped her with property matters for years. She needed to understand what legal ground James had to sell the house and whether she still had any rights. Mr. Ellis confirmed what Sarah feared. James had signed documents granting him power of attorney, allowing him to manage and even sell the property. "How did he get you to sign that?" Mr. Ellis asked with concern. Sarah was silent. She had no recollection of giving such authority, but now she realized she must have signed papers during a visit to London when James accompanied her to some appointments. Perhaps she had trusted him too blindly. Feeling the weight of her mistake, Sarah began to piece together the puzzle. James must have planned this for months. He had kept her in the dark, pretending everything was fine while orchestrating the sale behind her back. Despite the anger boiling inside her, Sarah knew that losing her temper would solve nothing. She needed a strategy, calm and precise. She was not a woman to be underestimated. In the following days, Sarah visited the estate agent's office. She saw the listing for her home. The price was high, tempting for any buyer. Yet the sale was not yet complete. There was still time to intervene. Meanwhile, she heard whispers from neighbors about James's sudden financial troubles. Some suggested he was gambling, others hinted at debts mounting beyond control. None of this made sense to Sarah. Why would her son risk everything by selling the family home? What was driving him to such desperate measures? Sarah began to understand that this was more than a property dispute. It was a fracture in their relationship, a betrayal rooted in deeper pain. As she sat in her smaller townhouse later that week, Sarah drafted a letter to James. She did not want to confront him with accusations. Instead, she wrote about her love for him, the memories they shared, and the hope that he would explain himself. Yet, the question remained, would James ever answer? Days passed without a reply from James. Sarah's letter remained unopened, her calls unanswered. The silence between them grew heavier, stretching like an unbridgeable chasm. The man she once knew, the son she had loved unconditionally, was now a stranger hiding behind excuses and avoidance. Sarah tried to focus on her daily routines, But her thoughts kept drifting back to the house, to the sale, to the son she barely recognized. She spoke quietly to herself in the mornings, reminding herself that she was stronger than any betrayal. In Surrey, neighbors exchanged wary glances. Rumors swirled like autumn leaves in the wind. Some said James had gambled away his savings. Others whispered that he was involved in a shady business deal. Sarah refused to confirm or deny these stories, but she could feel their weight pressing on her. One afternoon, Sarah received a call from a solicitor representing a potential buyer. The sale was progressing quickly, they said. If nothing was done soon, the house would be sold and the new owners would take possession within weeks. Sarah felt a rush of urgency. She arranged to meet the solicitor, Mr. Reed, in a small cafe in Guildford. Mr. Reed was professional but firm. "Mrs. Whittaker," he said, "the contracts have been signed. Unless you contest the power of attorney, this sale will proceed." Sarah took a deep breath. Contesting the power of attorney was complicated and costly. More importantly, it could pit her against her own son in a legal battle that would fracture their relationship beyond repair. That evening, Sarah sat in her living room, staring at an old photograph of her and James when he was a boy. She remembered his laughter, his dreams. She wondered when everything had changed. Her mind raced with questions. What had driven James to such desperation? Was he in danger? Or was this a sign of deeper problems she had failed to see? Suddenly, a knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find an old friend, Claire, who had returned from London unexpectedly. Claire's eyes were filled with concern. "I heard about James," Claire said softly. "There's more going on than you know." Sarah invited Claire inside, hoping that this friend could shed light on the mystery that now clouded her life. Claire settled into the armchair, her eyes never leaving Sarah's. "There's something you must know," she began carefully. "When I last saw James in London, he seemed different. Stressed. Afraid, even." Sarah leaned forward, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Claire hesitated, choosing her words. "He was involved with some people, dangerous people. I don't know the details, but it seemed serious. He talked about owing money, about needing to get out of a tight spot." Sarah's mind raced. James never mentioned anything like this before. Had she been blind to his struggles? "That's why he tried to sell the house," Claire continued. "He needed the money fast. But he didn't want you to worry, so he lied about the business trip." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Why didn't he come to me? We could have faced this together." Claire shook her head. "He's proud, maybe too proud. And scared. Sometimes people hide the truth from those they love the most." Sarah felt a surge of determination. She had to find James and help him before it was too late. But where to start? That night, Sarah scoured her son's phone messages and emails. Among the clutter, she found a thread of conversations with a man named Oliver Grant. The tone was tense, urgent. Oliver seemed to be the one pushing James for repayment. Sarah called Oliver, disguising her voice and intentions. "I'm a concerned friend," she said softly. "Is there a way to resolve this without more trouble?" There was silence on the other end. Then a cold voice replied, "Not unless the debt is paid in full." Sarah's blood ran cold. This was more than a simple loan. It was a dangerous game with stakes higher than she imagined. Determined to protect her son and her home, Sarah began reaching out to old contacts in Surrey and London. Friends who owed her favors, people who could offer discreet help. She also started attending local council meetings, learning about any legal options she might have to stop the sale. Every step felt like walking a tightrope. Days passed in a blur of calls, meetings, and restless nights. Sarah refused to give up. In the midst of this turmoil, a letter arrived, handwritten, with James's familiar scrawl. He wrote that he was sorry, that he was scared, and that he needed her now more than ever. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. The next morning, just as the dawn painted the Surrey skies in soft shades of pink and gold, Sarah heard a knock on her front door. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door cautiously, and to her surprise, James stood there, looking exhausted and worn, his clothes rumpled and eyes heavy with worry. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry for everything. I came back to make things right." Sarah pulled him inside without hesitation, closing the door firmly behind him. "Tell me everything," she whispered. James sank into the armchair, rubbing his face with his hands. "I made a terrible mistake. I got involved with the wrong people, loan sharks, criminals. I thought I could fix it alone, but I was wrong." He told her about the debts, the threats, the fear that had driven him to sell the house without telling her. "I didn't want to lose you, or the home you gave me. But I was desperate." Sarah listened intently, her heart breaking but also filling with relief that he was safe, for now. "We have to stop the sale," she said firmly. "And we need a plan." Together, they began to map out their next steps. Sarah contacted a trustworthy solicitor who specialized in property law and urgent cases. James agreed to confront Oliver Grant, the man demanding the repayments, hoping to negotiate a way out. Days turned into tense meetings and cautious phone calls. Oliver was unyielding at first, but when faced with Sarah's determination and legal pressure, cracks began to show. Meanwhile, Sarah and James started to rebuild their fragile relationship, speaking honestly for the first time in months. Old wounds were not healed overnight, but the path to understanding had begun. One evening, as the sun set behind the Surrey hills, Sarah stood at the window, watching the fading light. She realized that though the battle was far from over, she was no longer alone. The silence in the solicitor's office was heavy as Sarah and James waited across from the man who had caused their lives to unravel. Oliver Grant sat comfortably in his tailored navy suit, fingers interlaced on the polished oak table, a faint smirk resting on his lips. "So," he said, voice smooth as silk, "I suppose this is the part where you beg me for mercy." Sarah kept her voice steady. "No, Mr. Grant. This is the part where we negotiate, or we take this to court." James glanced at her, visibly surprised by her calm strength. The solicitor, a silver-haired gentleman named Mr. Godfrey, adjusted his glasses and opened the file with deliberate care. "We have legal grounds to freeze the transaction based on fraudulent misrepresentation," Mr. Godfrey said evenly. "The property belongs jointly to Ms. Langdon. No sale can proceed without her signature, and no contract signed under duress can be enforced." Oliver's smirk twitched. "He signed it willingly." Sarah raised an eyebrow. A 27-year-old cornered by loan sharks and lied to about the terms of the deal. That's not willing. That's exploitation. The air in the room shifted. Oliver's posture stiffened slightly. "What exactly do you want?" Sarah leaned forward. "We want the sale voided. We want the original deeds restored. And we want assurance that you'll leave my son alone, permanently." There was a beat of silence. Then Oliver chuckled, shaking his head slowly. "You've got nerve, Ms. Langdon. I underestimated you." He stood, straightening his suit. "You'll have your documents by the end of the week. I hope, for your sake, the boy stays out of trouble. Next time, I won't be so generous." As he walked out, James let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Did that really just happen? Sarah smiled, her hands trembling slightly. "It did. But we're not finished. We still need to make sure he's telling the truth." Over the next few days, Mr. Godfrey worked tirelessly to ensure every document was reviewed, every clause examined. Oliver Grant did send through the papers as promised, but Sarah didn't rest until the deeds were fully back in her name. Despite their legal victory, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered beneath the surface. Men like Oliver didn't vanish quietly. She began to prepare for contingencies, just in case. James, on the other hand, threw himself into making things right. He found a job with a local construction firm, working long days and spending quiet nights at home, rebuilding trust brick by brick. Sarah found herself growing stronger too. The experience had carved something new in her, a quiet resilience she never knew she had. But deep in the night, when the winds howled against the windows of her cottage, she sometimes wondered, had they truly seen the last of Oliver Grant? It had been nearly a month since Sarah had faced Oliver Grant across the solicitor's table. Life had begun to settle again, slowly, cautiously. The garden was blooming again. James had begun to smile without guilt. And Sarah, for the first time in years, felt as though she could finally breathe. But peace, as she had come to learn, was often the calm before another storm. The night began like any other. Rain drizzled steadily across the thatched rooftops of the village, mist curling around the hedgerows like silent ghosts. Sarah sat by the hearth, a cup of chamomile tea in hand, flipping through a photo album from when James was a boy. The fire crackled gently, and for a moment, all was quiet. Until the knock. 3 sharp raps on the cottage door. Not urgent, but firm. Deliberate. Sarah froze. It was nearly 10 o'clock. No one came calling at this hour, not in this part of Gloucestershire. She set her mug down and stood cautiously, peering through the glass panel beside the door. A man in a drenched coat stood beneath the porch light. His hair plastered to his forehead, his shoulders sagged with fatigue, but his presence was undeniable. It was Frederick. Oliver Grant's former associate. Sarah unlocked the door but left the chain in place. "What do you want?" His voice was hoarse. "Please. I don't mean harm. I need to talk. Not about Oliver. About something else. May I come in?" Her instincts flared, but something in his tone, almost desperation, nudged her to listen. She opened the door. Frederick stepped inside, leaving a puddle on the doormat. He looked thinner, worn down. He glanced around nervously, as if expecting shadows to leap from the corners. "Thank you," he said, shivering slightly. "I wouldn't have come unless it was urgent." Sarah folded her arms. "Get to the point." He met her eyes. Oliver Grant didn't back down. He's building something worse. Sarah stiffened. He signed the papers. "The deeds are returned. It's done." Frederick shook his head. "On the surface, yes. But he's working through shell companies now. Buying up properties. Your cottage, it's not the only one. He's targeting people like you. The vulnerable. The alone." Sarah's breath caught. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm done being afraid of him. And because I think you can stop him. You already beat him once." Sarah's mind raced. She thought of the quiet neighbors, the widowed pensioner 3 doors down, the young couple who just moved in. If what Frederick said was true, this wasn't just about her anymore. She gestured toward the fire. "Sit. Talk. Tell me everything." And so he did. For nearly an hour, Frederick unraveled a web of front companies, offshore accounts, and backdoor deals. He showed her documents he had hidden, emails, property records, even recordings. He'd been compiling evidence quietly for months, afraid, but now emboldened by what Sarah had done. By the time he left, the fire had burned low. Sarah sat in the embers' glow, staring into the ashes. There was no going back now. This time, she wouldn't just defend her home. She would take Oliver Grant down, for good. The morning after Frederick's visit, Sarah awoke before the sun. Her mind spun with everything he had shared, the shell companies, the frightened homeowners, the scale of Oliver Grant's plan. What once had been a personal betrayal now revealed itself as a calculated business of exploitation. She made strong tea, wrapped herself in her wool coat, and stood at the edge of the garden, watching mist roll over the hedgerows. The house no longer felt like just a home. It was a line in the sand. James arrived shortly after 9. His face lit up when he saw her, though the look quickly turned to concern. "You're up early," he said, setting down a basket of bread and eggs. "Something wrong?" Sarah met his gaze. "Oliver never stopped. And someone came last night to warn me. We've got work to do." They spent the day reviewing everything Frederick had left, forged property deeds, proof of offshore accounts, and a pattern of transactions all leading back to a single hidden trust, one registered in a tax haven, under Oliver Grant's deceased uncle's name. It was damning. James frowned as he flipped through the documents. "We need to go public." Sarah nodded. "We will. But we'll do it smart. We'll do it on our terms." That afternoon, they rang a former journalist Sarah had known from her days at the village council. Clara Whittingham, now retired, had a reputation for integrity, and for writing exposés that had rattled county officials more than once. When Clara arrived at dusk, she listened intently, pen scratching furiously. She examined the papers, made phone calls, and promised one thing before she left: if this story runs, it'll tear him down. And run it did. Within 48 hours, the local paper published the headline, "Land Baron Behind Deceptive Property Scheme, Villagers at Risk." It detailed Oliver's manipulations, complete with supporting evidence and anonymous interviews. The news spread like wildfire through the Gloucestershire villages. Sarah braced herself for retaliation. But none came. Instead, she received visitors. An elderly couple from 3 streets over, tears in their eyes. A single mother who hadn't known the land beneath her cottage had been transferred to a company in Cyprus. People Sarah had known for years, now thanking her for speaking up, for not backing down. Still, there was one person she hadn't heard from. Until 1 week later. On a grey Tuesday morning, a car pulled up to her cottage. Out stepped Oliver Grant, alone. He looked nothing like the man she had once feared, creased suit, no entourage, just a man unraveled. Sarah opened the door but said nothing. "I lost everything," he said simply. "Investors pulled out. The trust was seized. You did this." Sarah tilted her head. "You did this to yourself." He sighed. "I was trying to build something. By breaking people." He hesitated. "I just want to know, why didn't you just let it go?" Sarah looked at him, her voice calm. "Because you didn't just take a house. You tried to erase a life. And now, it's your turn to rebuild, if you can." He didn't respond. Just nodded, and walked away. The door clicked shut behind him. Sarah turned toward the garden. The sun had broken through the clouds at last. She didn't need revenge. She had justice. And that was enough.